I hope it is as obvious to you as it is to me that the collective ego will benefit when we transcend our individual egos. You, as a single individual, have a sacred quest. That quest involves coming to your higher spiritual nature and inviting it to show you the way of the sacred self in your daily life. This means denying the demands of your ego if those demands contradict the guidance of your higher self. Our world is a collection of individuals urged on by the loving presence within all of us to achieve the sacred quest personally and collectively. The world will become a peaceful, fulfilled, cooperative, loving, truthful, tolerant, and pure environment as the individual parts that make up the collective consciousness restrain their egos. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. The whole behaves precisely as does its individual parts. Many people I speak to tell me that they feel powerless to affect the global community. They believe that, given the scope of the world's problems, their efforts are so infinitesimal as to be insignificant. They simply are not seeing that it is precisely through a change in individual consciousness that the world will be transformed. All of the problems that we face as a group reflect those we have individually. The world is encountering a spiritual deficit that reflects our need to consciously get on the path of our sacred quest. The solution to individual and global problems is to overcome the spiritual deficit. When you make the shift in consciousness, allowing yourself to be an agent of heightened awareness, you are contributing to the transformation of our world. You are not separate from the other souls on this planet. You share the identical energy that embodies the souls of Rwanda and Pakistan, for example. You are the lamp, and God is the electricity. It flows through you as surely as it flows through all living things. When you make the decision to choose the guidance of your higher self over your false self, you have plugged into the divine inner energy. When you run your life based on the principles of the higher self, you are contributing to the transformation of the entire world. You must strengthen your will to choose the sacred path when your ego calls you a fool for believing there could ever be a world without war. If your ego can convince you, you will become part of the collective ego's falseness. Individuals who choose ego propaganda are individuals who will build more bombs and manufacture more weapons. Currently, there are some 6 billion people on the planet. About 3 million are at war or in skirmishes that cause them to kill and torture each other. But that means that there are 5,997,000,000 who are not at war. This is a hopeful statistic, which our egos do not want us to consider. By contrast, the collective ego strives to keep the populace nervously on the edge with reminders to view the world in terms of us versus them. This ego viewpoint not only reinforces the insane escalation of ways to kill each other, but is also responsible for most of our social problems. The world ego is our false self, and this is the primary characteristic that we need to recognize. We want to believe that we are our physical bodies, and that the territories we occupy are so important that we are willing to kill each other in order to maintain those boundary lines. We have become convinced that our true identities are located in tribal ancestries, traditions, histories, genealogies, and the color and shape of our bodies. We have lost sight of our authentic identities because of the labels that our egos have assigned to us. Our egos have coalesced into a worldwide false perception of ourselves based on an unwillingness to know our true spiritual nature. Although all of our spiritual leaders have reminded us of our divinity and implored and even commanded us to love one another, the world ego has won this battle and produced ancient enmities and uncountable horrors in the long history of humanity. As you travel the path of your sacred quest, you will help to dispel the absurdity of specialness that the ego so assiduously promotes. You will see an end to this kind of thinking in your life and on a worldwide scale as well. The higher part of ourselves that I have talked about on this tape reacts to a vision that is infinite. This is assuredly not the vision of the ego. The ego is just as cowardly on a collective scale as it is on an individual basis. The world ego is frightened of a mass appeal to overcome our spiritual deficit. When people face inward and embrace a more loving perspective, the power of the sacred self will create change not only in the community but in the entire world as well. The world ego will do all that it can to prevent this kind of inner approach. It will ridicule those who promote meditation, peaceful demonstrations, and the love of God as a way out of the morass of social evils. It is just as true on the collective level as it is on the individual plane. The higher self urges you to simplify and to avoid contributing to anything that hurts others or increases the separation from your spiritual source.
When Madame Blavatsky talked about who the leaders of the spiritual revolution would be, she said that these leaders will be ordinary people, regular, everyday folks, school teachers, musicians, artists, cab drivers, regular folks. And these people will speak out with a voice. And this voice will be heard. And then the bureaucracies will fall in line and begin to reflect what it is that this consciousness is instituting in our people. And if you look at the people who have been instrumental in changing consciousness in the last 25 years, you look at the people whose programs you listen to through Nightingale Congress and ask what are their backgrounds. You find out that they're salesmen. Marianne Williamson was a singer, a nightclub singer. Louise Hay was a dancer. Dennis Waitley was a salesman. Zig Ziglar was a preacher. People who just did everyday, regular things. I was a school teacher. And somehow there's a power, there's a pressure, there's something that has come and put us in a position of just talking about this kind of shift, this kind of consciousness.